The first thing I noticed was not the size of the container. It was the lock. Someone had threaded a thick orange padlock through the handles of a 40-foot steel shipping container sitting behind my garage, and a white label on the front of that lock said Cypress Harbor HOA. The container was dark gray, almost black in the late afternoon shade. It filled the narrow strip between my detached garage and the back hedge so completely that I could no longer roll my trash bins through there. I had been gone for 18 days helping my sister after shoulder surgery. When I left, that strip was grass, 2 sprinkler heads, and a row of flat stepping stones. When I came home, the grass was pressed into 2 muddy tracks. 1 sprinkler head had been capped. A temporary electrical cable ran from a small weatherproof box near the garage to a circular fan cut into the container wall. My sister lived outside Jacksonville, a little over 2 hours away. The original plan was for me to stay 4 days, get her through the first follow-up appointment, and come home. Then her physical therapist changed the schedule. Her kitchen sink started leaking, and the sling made it impossible for her to drive. 4 days became 10, then 18. I checked my doorbell camera each morning and paid a teenager on our street to roll my trash bin out on Thursdays. Nothing in those clips showed the rear strip because the garage blocked that view. That strip was not impressive. Nobody would put it in a real estate brochure. But it was the only practical route from the driveway to the backyard without going through the house. I used it for the trash bins, garden cart, ladder, and the small utility trailer I kept behind the garage. The previous owner had placed the stepping stones there because the soil stayed soft after summer rain. Blocking it did not trap me inside my property, but it turned every ordinary task into a trip around the opposite fence gate. That detail mattered because Denise later described the area as viewser. People use that word when they mean they have not personally seen the use. A strip can look empty and still be the route that makes the rest of a property work. There was no note on my door, no permit card, no contractor sign, nothing in my email except the usual reminders about trash cans and the 4th of July pool event. I stood there with my suitcase still inside the front hall and took pictures from every angle. I work as a receiving supervisor for a grocery distribution center. That does not make me a lawyer or a chemical expert. It does mean I spend most of my week looking at loads that arrive somewhere they do not belong, paperwork that almost matches, and people who suddenly become very careful with their wording when a trailer number is written down. So I wrote down the container number. I photographed the lock, the cable, the fan, the tire ruts, and the spot where the stepping stones disappeared under one steel corner. Then I called Clay Harmon, our community manager. Clay answered on the 4th ring. "Clay, there is a shipping container behind my garage." There was a pause just long enough to tell me he already knew. "That is association equipment," he said. "It is temporary." "What is inside it?" "Maintenance materials." "What kind?" Another pause. "You should not interfere with it, Nate. It will be removed after the holiday weekend." I asked him what document allowed the association to store anything on my parcel. He said he was away from his computer and would send me the maintenance access information in the morning. "And the inventory?" I asked. "The vendor has that. Then send me the vendor contact." His voice tightened. "Please do not touch association property." I looked at the orange lock hanging 3 feet from my garage wall. "I am asking you not to store association property on my land." He repeated that it was temporary, and the call ended. At first, I tried to treat it like a delivery mistake. Those happen. Drivers get bad pins. Old site maps survive longer than fences and hedges. A contractor sees open grass and assumes somebody checked. What bothered me was not that a mistake might have happened. It was that Clay had skipped straight past explaining the mistake and gone directly to warning me. That evening, I dragged my trash bins around the other side of the house. At 11:17, while I emptied my suitcase in the kitchen, I heard a low mechanical hum through the open window. I went outside and saw the circular fan turning behind its metal guard. It ran for 11 minutes, stopped, and started again at 11:43. I did not smell anything unusual. There was no smoke, no leak, and no reason to manufacture an emergency where none existed. But a powered ventilation fan changed the question. Landscaping tools did not normally need a fan that cycled after midnight. I took a short video from my patio. Then I went inside, locked the back door, and sent Clay an email so there would be a record. I listed exactly what I could observe: 1 locked container, one powered fan, one temporary cable, blocked access, damaged grass, and no notice or consent. I asked for the inventory, the vendor, the placement authority, and the removal date. I also wrote that I would not open, move, disconnect, or otherwise interfere with the container while the association arranged a safe inspection and removal. That last sentence mattered. The container was on my land, but I had no idea what was inside. Breaking a lock might have felt satisfying for 10 seconds and complicated everything for 10 months. The next morning, I received 3 explanations before lunch. At 7:42, Denise Mercer, the HOA president, replied that the container held landscaping supplies needed for summer projects. At 9:06, Clay sent a separate message calling it pool renovation equipment. At 11:18, the association posted a notice in the resident portal thanking everyone for their patience, while temporary association supplies were staged during clubhouse improvements. None of those phrases meant the same thing. Denise called me just after noon. She had been president for 3 years and spoke in the calm, practiced tone of someone who considered every disagreement a meeting she was already chairing. "Nate, this is being made much larger than it needs to be. Then make it small. Tell me what is inside and show me where the association has storage rights behind my garage. The rear strip has always been used for maintenance access. Access to what? The common landscaping. There is no common landscaping behind my garage." She told me the developer had retained a maintenance strip along the edge of several lots. I asked for the recorded document. She said Clay would send the map. Then she added, "If you move association equipment, you may be responsible for any resulting damage." I had not threatened to move it. I reminded her of that and repeated my request in plain language. Written inventory, vendor contact, legal placement authority, and a firm removal date within 48 hours. Denise sighed. "The pool has been closed for repairs for nearly a month. Families have been waiting. The container supports that project. That was the first time anyone connected it directly to the pool." "How?" I asked. "I am not discussing vendor operations with you. Vendor operations are sitting 6 feet from my garage." She ended the call by saying the board would respond through proper channels. Around 2, my neighbor Mara Bell came over. Mara was 67, lived 2 houses down, and had supported Denise in the last board election. Her 2 grandchildren stayed with her during school breaks and treated our clubhouse pool like a second home. "I heard there is a problem with the pool equipment," she said. That wording told me the board had already started talking. I showed her the container from my patio. She frowned at the fan, then asked if I could just let it stay until after the holiday event. "Maybe," I said. "If they tell me what it is, show me they are allowed to put it there, and confirm it is stored correctly." Denise says it is only temporary. Temporary is a length of time. It is not permission. Mara did not like that answer, but she did not argue. She looked at the container again and asked what was inside. That is what I am trying to find out. By evening, the container had become neighborhood news. Our community was not enormous. 146 homes arranged around 2 ponds and a clubhouse. But it was large enough for rumors to travel without anyone admitting where they began. One message said I had refused an emergency generator needed for the pool pumps. Another said the container held replacement lounge chairs. A third said county crews had placed it there for hurricane supplies. The hurricane explanation spread fastest because it made the container sound responsible. We lived in Brevard County. Everyone had a storm story and a shelf of bottled water. If the association had said a locked steel box contained emergency supplies, many residents would have treated questions as selfish. I checked the county emergency management notices before responding. There was no staging program at Cypress Harbor. Then I asked Clay directly whether the container held hurricane equipment. He did not answer. Instead of correcting every rumor, I wrote a short timeline for myself. Delivery happened while I was away. Clay called it association equipment. Denise called it landscaping supplies. The portal called it temporary supplies. Denise later tied it to the pool. A fan ran at night. No inventory or recorded authority had been produced. Keeping that private timeline stopped me from chasing whatever version appeared next. It also reminded me that uncertainty was not proof of danger. The responsible position was not the HOA is hiding poison. It was, the HOA placed an unknown powered container on a private parcel and will not provide the records needed to evaluate it. That sentence was less exciting, but it was true. Clay finally sent the map at 4:36. It was a faded developer landscaping exhibit, not a recorded easement. A green line ran behind 5 lots and stopped at a hedge symbol. There were no parcel numbers, no dimensions, no signature from me or the previous owner. The title block was dated 12 years earlier, before my garage had been built and before the developer turned the association over to residents. I replied that the exhibit did not establish storage rights. I attached my 48-hour request again. Denise answered with one sentence: "The association will not be bullied into compromising a community project." That was the moment I stopped treating the container as a simple delivery error. A mistake can be corrected quietly. A position has to be defended. Denise had chosen a position before she had shown me a single document supporting it. The following morning, I walked the outside of the container again. I stayed on my grass and did not touch the doors or lock. Near the rear corner, a strip of clear pallet wrap had caught under a steel edge. Part of a paper label was still attached. Most of it was smeared, but I could read a supplier code and the word Aquatics. 10 feet away, under an orange traffic cone, I found the customer copy of a tire service receipt. It probably fell from a delivery truck. The customer name was BlueCurrent Aquatics, and the service address was our clubhouse. That did not prove what was inside the container. It did give me a focused question. I searched the HOA portal for BlueCurrent. 3 weeks earlier, the board had approved an emergency contract after a roof leak damaged part of the clubhouse pool equipment area. The meeting minutes were thin. They authorized temporary operational measures so the pool could reopen before the holiday weekend. There was no mention of a container or off-site storage. At work, when a product code appears on a damaged label, we do not guess what the product is and start moving it around. We identify the supplier, preserve the load information, and ask for the correct safety data sheet if the contents require one. The point of an SDS is not to make ordinary people sound technical. It tells the people handling a product what they need to know about storage, incompatibilities, protective equipment, and emergency response. I emailed BlueCurrent through the public address on its website. I included the container number, the receipt number, 2 exterior photos, and my address. I wrote that a rented container associated with their company appeared to have been delivered to a private residential parcel without owner consent. I asked for the site supervisor and requested that they preserve the delivery instructions. Luis Ortega called me 40 minutes later. He introduced himself as the field supervisor and asked whether I had opened the container. No. Moved it? No. Skicked the fan? No. His questions came too quickly to be casual. I asked what the fan was ventilating. "I cannot discuss customer inventory with someone who is not the customer," he said. "Your customer put that inventory on my parcel." He asked me to send a clear picture of the container ID plate, the temporary power connection, and the space around both doors. I told him I would photograph only what was visible without touching the unit. "That is fine," he said. "Do not open it." Everyone agrees on that part. Before hanging up, he asked who had accepted delivery. I said I did not know. 5 minutes after I sent the new photos, I received an automated email from BlueCurrent saying further deliveries to the Cypress Harbor project had been placed on hold pending site verification. That was the first outside consequence, and I had not accused anyone of a crime or called the evening news. A vendor had looked at its own container number, its own delivery, and the location. It had decided to stop and verify. Denise called within an hour. "You contacted our contractor without authorization. I notified a company that its equipment is on my land. You are disrupting essential pool maintenance. What is in the container?" She went silent, then said, "Appropriate maintenance products." That was explanation number 4. I told her BlueCurrent had asked for site photos and had paused deliveries. She said the board would handle the vendor and warned me not to communicate with residents about incomplete information. I did not send a neighborhood blast. I updated Mara because she had asked me directly. I showed her the BlueCurrent receipt and the meeting minutes. She stared at the word Aquatics on the torn label. "So it is pool stuff," she said. "It appears connected to the pool. I still do not know what is inside." Denise said landscaping. She told me that too. Mara looked embarrassed, but not convinced. People do not change sides because of one receipt. They change when the explanation they trusted stops fitting what they can see. The current survey arrived in my inbox that afternoon from the title company that handled my purchase. I also downloaded the county parcel map. The survey was clear. The strip behind my garage was inside my lot. A narrow landscaping access area existed near the front entrance, where the association maintained a hedge and irrigation line. It did not continue around the house. It did not reach the container. The developer exhibit Clay had sent showed a hedge line that no longer existed. It was an illustration for landscaping, not a grant of storage rights. I created a one-page comparison. On the left was the obsolete exhibit. On the right was the current signed survey with the container location, marked from fixed points on the garage. I did not pretend my measurements replaced a professional survey. I used the existing survey and visible building corners to show why the association's document did not reach the place it claimed. I sent the comparison to Clay, Denise, BlueCurrent, and the container rental company identified on the ID plate. I asked the rental company to preserve its delivery ticket, PIN location, acceptance signature, and driver photographs. I repeated that the vendor had permission to access the parcel by appointment for inspection and removal only. That distinction became important later. The rental company replied the next morning. Its driver had followed a digital PIN supplied by Clay. The delivery photo showed Denise standing beside the truck while the container was lowered into place. The rental description read, "We other secure pool maintenance for storage." It did not say chemical room. It did not say hazardous storage. It did not identify my parcel owner. And the authorization box contained the association's name. The driver photographs added details I had not known. The delivery occurred at 8:14 on a Tuesday morning. Denise wore the same blue board polo she used at community events. Clay was visible near the garage holding a printed exhibit. One image showed the truck's stabilizer pad resting on my stepping stones. Another showed a worker pointing at the exterior outlet while Clay held the temporary cable. Those photographs closed off 2 escape routes. The board could not say the driver chose the location alone, and it could not say nobody knew the container would be powered. It still might have been a careless mistake, but it was an observed mistake accepted in stages. I asked the rental coordinator what normally happened when a customer supplied the wrong location. She said the company would schedule relocation after the customer, and property owner resolved access, and after the contents owner confirmed the unit was safe to transport. A loaded container was not simply hooked up like a small trailer. Weight distribution, internal securing, and the nature of the contents mattered. That explanation also answered a question residents kept sending me. Why not just have it towed away? Because the quickest physical action was not necessarily the safest or cleanest procedural action. If I hired someone to drag a loaded container across the yard, I could damage the contents, the truck, the property, or the evidence showing how it arrived. The company that owned the box and the company responsible for what was inside both needed to participate. Denise responded in the resident portal before she responded to me. Due to the objections of one homeowner, she wrote, the community's holiday pool schedule may be affected. Within 2 hours, I had 9 messages. 2 were polite. 4 accused me of being difficult. 1 suggested I wanted the pool closed because I did not have children. The others asked what was actually happening. I answered only with facts. I had not asked anyone to close the pool. I had asked the association to identify a powered, locked container on my parcel and show its authority to place it there. BlueCurrent had paused deliveries after reviewing its own site information. Mara came over again, this time holding her phone. Denise says you refused temporary access. I showed her my email offering scheduled access for inspection and removal. That is not what she posted, Mara said. No. She read the full thread twice. Then she asked me to forward it to her. The conflict had shifted. At first it was about a steel box. Now it was about who could prove what they had said and when they had said it. The board held an informal listening session that night. Denise called it an opportunity to reduce misinformation, but she did not bring an inventory or vendor representative. She placed the old landscaping exhibit on an easel and pointed to the green line behind the lots, as though the color itself created a legal right. I brought the signed survey and the delivery photographs. I did not stand at the front or make a speech. When Denise said the association had historically maintained the corridor, I asked which maintenance invoices showed work behind my garage. Clay searched his laptop and found hedge trimming invoices near the community entrance, exactly where the recorded access area existed. He found nothing for the rear strip. A resident named Paul asked why that distinction mattered if the container would be gone soon. I told him it mattered for the same reason his neighbor could not store a boat in his side yard for a week, simply because both yards were inside Cypress Harbor. Duration might affect damages. It did not answer permission. Denise said comparing community equipment to a private boat was inflammatory. Paul looked at the photographs and said the container was larger than his boat. The room laughed, but I did not. Humor was useful until it made the board feel publicly cornered. Denise already cared too much about appearance. I wanted the container reviewed, not a performance where she had to win back the room. I asked one final question. Who reviewed the current parcel before the PIN was sent? Clay said the board relied on the developer exhibit. Denise said the manager handled logistics. Neither answer identified a person who had checked the recorded survey. That was enough. The session ended without a resolution, but residents left knowing the disagreement was not between my opinion and Denise's. It was between two documents created for different purposes. Luis called that afternoon with a more careful tone. He said, BlueCurrent's purchase order for the Cypress Harbor project included sodium hypochlorite solution, muriatic acid, dry treatment products, absorbent materials, and a gasoline-powered pressure washer used for deck cleaning. He would not confirm what had actually been loaded until his inventory team reconciled the records. He did confirm that the original scope assumed approved temporary storage arranged by the customer. Was this container represented to you as a chemical storage space? I asked. It was represented as weather-secure maintenance storage during renovation. Is that the same thing? Not necessarily. That was the most honest answer anyone had given me. Different pool products can require different handling. Some must stay dry. Some must be kept away from incompatible materials. Fuel-powered equipment introduces its own concerns. The exact answer depends on the product, quantity, container, ventilation, containment, and local rules. I did not know enough to declare the setup illegal from my patio, and I refused to pretend I did. Luis said he had requested the SDS packet and contacted BlueCurrent's insurer. Until they reviewed the site, there would be no additional loading and no ordinary mover would relocate the container. That evening, Clay asked to meet me at the clubhouse without Denise. He looked exhausted. The chemical room had suffered water intrusion during a roof repair. The board wanted the pool reopened before the holiday event. BlueCurrent needed temporary storage. Clay used the old developer exhibit because it showed what he thought was a maintenance strip. Denise approved the PIN because the area behind my garage was hidden from the street and close enough for the vendor's service truck. We thought it was common access, he said. Did anyone check the recorded documents? He rubbed his forehead. Not before delivery. Did anyone tell me you were away? That sentence explained the entire decision. My absence had not created permission. It had only removed the person most likely to ask for it. Clay asked for 4 more days. Moving the container before the holiday would create rental penalties, contractor fees, and public embarrassment. He offered to prepare a temporary license for me to sign. I told him I would allow access for inspection and safe removal. I would not retroactively authorize storage. I still could not evaluate. Denise will say you are forcing the closure, he said. The board reopened a pool before it had a compliant storage plan. That is not something I can sign away. The next step was not calling a fire marshal and demanding a dramatic raid. It was finding the agency that actually inspected the pool. Florida treats many subdivision and HOA pools as public pools for sanitation and safety oversight. The county health department's environmental health program handled operating permits and inspections. I called with the facility name and permit number from the HOA portal. Inspector Aisha Grant returned my call the next day. I told her what I knew, and just as important, what I did not know. I had an unidentified inventory linked to pool maintenance, a temporary powered container on a residential parcel, conflicting descriptions, a vendor delivery hold, and a chemical room renovation. I did not claim there was a leak or immediate exposure. She appreciated that. Grant explained that pool chemicals generally had to be stored in a cool, dry, well-ventilated area under a roof and inaccessible to the public. Product labels and SDS instructions mattered. Storage design, separation, containment, electrical work, and fire code questions could involve other local officials. Her office would review the pool's operating records and the declared chemical storage location. She asked for the board's contact, BlueCurrent's contact, and exterior photographs. She also asked whether anyone had opened the unit since placement. "Not that I have seen," I said. "I have not touched it. Keep it that way until the responsible parties coordinate access." That afternoon, the county requested the pool logs, renovation information, storage location, and chemical inventory. The local fire marshal's office asked BlueCurrent for SDS documents and an access plan before the container was opened or moved. Nobody put up flashing lights. Nobody arrested Denise. The system moved through emails, scheduled calls, and people comparing descriptions. The pool was placed on temporary operational hold pending review of its chemical storage arrangement. The hold did not happen instantly. Grant first requested the operating log and the location listed for chemical storage. The pool permit file still identified the clubhouse equipment area. The board's renovation email showed that room was partly unavailable, but there was no updated storage location in the materials initially provided. Grant then scheduled a site review and coordinated with local building staff and a deputy fire marshal because the temporary electrical work and container setup crossed areas outside a routine water quality check. That took 2 business days. During those 2 days, the pool remained open with limited hours under the board's existing plan, while BlueCurrent suspended new chemical deliveries. A certified operator checked the pool each morning, using only the supplies already staged at the clubhouse. When those on-site supplies reached the minimum level BlueCurrent was willing to operate with, the vendor notified the board that it could not continue service without access to the container inventory or a compliant alternate supply arrangement. The operational hold followed that notice. It was not a county employee flipping a dramatic red switch. It was the result of 3 ordinary constraints meeting at once. The declared storage location did not match. The vendor would not replenish from an unverified setup, and the board had no alternate plan ready. That sequence mattered. Denise later tried to summarize everything as one complaint closed the pool. The records showed something more uncomfortable. One complaint revealed that the reopening plan depended on a container no responsible party was yet willing to open, move, or continue supplying. Denise posted within 20 minutes. Because of a complaint initiated by Nate Cole, the holiday pool event is postponed. This time Mara replied publicly. The county notice says it requested storage records and inspection. It does not say Nate closed the pool. That single comment changed the tone of the thread. Mara was not a board critic. Residents knew she had supported Denise. When she corrected the wording, people started asking for documents instead of choosing sides. Mara later showed me an older screenshot. The board had announced the reopening date 2 days before the temporary storage work order was finalized. Denise had sold the deadline first and solved the logistics afterward. The pressure increased over the next 48 hours. Denise called an emergency board meeting and presented a temporary property license for my signature. It was dated to begin the day before the container arrived. "This resolves the parcel concern," she said. "It creates permission after the fact," I replied. "It does not identify the inventory, storage requirements, electrical setup, or removal process." She accused me of moving the goalposts. I reminded her that my first email asked for those same 4 things. Clay then released part of an email where I had written that the vendor could access the parcel by appointment. Denise highlighted that sentence as evidence I had accepted the container. I opened the complete email on the meeting room screen. The next words were "for inspection and removal only." The room became very quiet. Luis joined by phone. BlueCurrent's insurer would not authorize a standard container mover until the inventory was reconciled and the interior conditions were documented. If incompatible products or fuel-powered equipment shared the space without the required controls, qualified handlers might be needed. The rental company also refused to pick up a loaded container without written clearance from the party responsible for its contents. Denise kept returning to the holiday event. Luis kept returning to the inventory. They were speaking different languages. Hers was schedule and reputation. His was custody and risk. The board voted to cooperate with the inspection, though Denise abstained from calling it cooperation. Outside the meeting, Mara apologized for asking me to just let it stay. I thought it was a box of pool chairs, she said. So did half the board, apparently. She almost laughed, then looked toward the pool. I still want it open. So do I. I just want whatever keeps it open stored somewhere it is supposed to be. Inspection morning arrived 5 days after I came home. It was hot before 9. BlueCurrent set temporary barriers around the rear strip. Luis arrived with 2 technicians. The rental representative brought the container key record. An insurance risk consultant photographed the exterior. Inspector Grant and a deputy fire marshal reviewed the SDS packet and inventory sheet at a folding table on my driveway. Before anyone approached the doors, they spent nearly an hour on paperwork. The inventory sheet listed what BlueCurrent believed had been loaded. The delivery manifest showed pallet counts, but not the final position of each item. The SDS packet described storage considerations for individual products. The rental agreement described a weather-secure container. None of those documents by itself described the actual arrangement behind my garage. Luis compared seal numbers. The risk consultant asked who installed the fan and whether its electrical components were appropriate for the intended environment. Clay produced an invoice from a general maintenance subcontractor. The invoice said, "Vent kit and temp power," with no design attachment. The deputy fire marshal did not announce that the fan was illegal. He simply noted that nobody had shown how the equipment had been selected for the products and conditions represented. Grant reviewed the clubhouse records and asked why the temporary storage change had not appeared in the pool operating file. Clay said, everyone believed the container was an extension of the renovation work area. Grant asked where that work area was shown on the approved plan. He had no answer. The officials were careful about their limits. Grant focused on pool operation and chemical storage conditions. The deputy fire marshal focused on access, equipment mix, product information, and emergency considerations. The rental representative focused on the container and transport. The risk consultant focused on what the insurer would authorize. Nobody claimed to be there to settle title to my land. That was handled by the survey, the absence of consent, and the delivery record. The inspection was about what could safely happen next. Denise arrived in a whiteboard polo and tried to stand inside the barrier. The deputy fire marshal asked her to remain with the other observers. She said she represented the owner of the contents. Luis answered before anyone else could. BlueCurrent controls access until the inventory is verified. That was the quiet reversal I had been waiting for. Denise had spent a week telling me the container was association property, and I had no authority to touch it. Now the people she had hired were telling her that she did not control the key either. Luis checked the seal number against his records. A technician placed absorbent materials near the threshold as a precaution. The officer confirmed there was no odor, visible leak, heat damage, or immediate emergency. Then the rental representative unlocked the orange HOA padlock and Luis opened the right-hand door a few inches. Everyone waited. Nothing dramatic happened. No gas rolled out. No one fell backward. The technician checked the air at the opening. Then the doors were opened wider under the agreed procedure. Inside were labeled pool treatment products on pallets, liquid containers, bags of dry product, spill supplies, plastic measuring equipment, and a gasoline-powered pressure washer parked near makeshift shelving. The products were not mysterious black barrels. They were ordinary commercial materials that become a problem when people ignore how and where they are supposed to be stored. The inspector and deputy fire marshal did not declare every item forbidden. They documented the combined arrangement, incomplete separation, no demonstrated secondary containment plan for the temporary setup, a ventilation system that had not been presented as part of an approved chemical storage design, mixed maintenance equipment, and no clear emergency information at the site. The container's location and access path were also different from what the vendor believed the association had authorized. The pressure washer mattered because fuel-powered equipment did not belong casually mixed into a chemical storage decision. The fan mattered because adding ventilation did not automatically turn a steel container into a compliant room. The lock mattered because secure access was necessary, but a lock alone did not solve ventilation, separation, containment, labeling, or emergency response. Inspector Grant directed that the pool remain closed until the association documented compliant chemical storage and operating arrangements. The deputy fire marshal required BlueCurrent and its insurer to control relocation based on the verified inventory. The rental company recorded that the original delivery location had been supplied by the customer without the parcel owner's approval. Denise asked whether the container could remain another week while the clubhouse room was repaired. The risk consultant said no, not because the container was about to explode, but because the insurer now had documented differences between the declared use, the actual mixed contents, and the placement conditions. Leaving it in place after that review would be a new decision, not an old mistake. For the first time, Denise had no shorter explanation available. Relocation took 2 days. BlueCurrent inventoried each product and moved it according to the manufacturer information and the approved temporary plan. The pressure washer and ordinary tools went to separate equipment storage. Chemical products went to a compliant facility until the clubhouse room could pass review. The temporary power connection was removed by an electrician. The soil behind my garage was tested where the container doors had been. No contamination was found. I was relieved. A disaster would have made the story louder, but it would not have made anyone safer or wiser. What happened was expensive enough, without inventing a poisoned yard. The container was empty when the rental truck finally lifted it. The grass underneath was yellow and flattened. One sprinkler line was cracked, and the stepping stones had been pushed several inches into the soil. The HOA paid for survey staking, electrical removal, turf and irrigation repair, rental delay, re-delivery, inspection-related vendor time, and compliant interim storage. Members requested the contract, emails, delivery photographs, and invoices. Those records showed that Clay had sent the location pin, Denise had accepted delivery, and the board had publicly committed to reopening before the temporary storage details were settled. BlueCurrent had assumed the association controlled the selected site. The rental company had assumed the same. Everyone had relied on someone else to check the one fact that mattered first: whose land it was and what the space was approved to hold. The first cost summary circulated privately among board members, then appeared in the meeting packet after residents requested it. The container rental itself was the smallest line. Delay and re-delivery cost more. Electrical removal and lawn repair added another layer. BlueCurrent billed for inventory reconciliation, controlled handling, and extra technician time. The surveyor charged for restaking the affected boundary. The compliant interim storage arrangement cost more per week than the board had hoped to save by using the container. There was also a disputed invoice from the maintenance subcontractor who installed the fan and temporary power. The contractor said it had been told the unit would hold pool maintenance supplies. The board said the contractor should have asked more questions. The insurer reserved its position while those representations were reviewed. A reservation was not the same as a denial, and I did not pretend the association had lost coverage. It meant the insurer was not promising to absorb every consequence of a decision made outside the described scope. Residents were angry about the money, but not in the instant, unanimous way stories sometimes make neighborhoods behave. Some still blamed me for escalating the issue. Others blamed Clay. A few defended Denise because the pool had been closed too long, and they believed she was trying to solve a real problem. The shift happened slowly as records accumulated. People could forgive a rushed placement more easily than they could forgive the board's changing descriptions and selective emails. At one meeting, Paul asked whether the board would have disclosed the container if I had returned after the holiday instead of before it. Denise said that question was speculative. Nobody contradicted her. They did not need to. The delivery had occurred without notice, and the planned removal date was after the event. The timeline answered for her. Clay resigned from the Cypress Harbor account the following week. He did not expose a secret conspiracy or hand me a folder in a parking lot. He sent a short notice saying the management company was assigning a new representative. Denise remained president through the next scheduled election, but the board removed her ability to approve unbudgeted vendor work without a second officer's signature. At the next meeting, Mara asked the question that ended the argument. Why did the board tell us Nate closed the pool before the inspector had even visited? Denise said communications had been made with limited information. Mara nodded. That is exactly the problem. The board adopted a new project control policy. Temporary structures required a current parcel check, written owner consent when private property was involved, a disclosed vendor scope, and confirmation that storage or safety requirements had been reviewed before delivery. Projects involving pool chemicals required the responsible operator and vendor to identify the storage location in the operating records. It was not a heroic reform. It was the basic process they should have followed the first time. 3 weeks later, the clubhouse chemical room passed review, and the pool reopened. Mara brought her grandchildren on the first Saturday. She stopped at my mailbox and apologized again. From my kitchen window, I could hear kids splashing at the clubhouse that afternoon. It was ordinary neighborhood noise again, which was exactly what the board had nearly sacrificed by rushing the job. They made it sound like you hated the pool, she said. I hated the container. Fair. Behind my garage, the grass was green again. The survey pins were visible, and I installed a small marker near the side path indicating the private parcel boundary. It was not a threatening sign. It did not mention Denise or the HOA. It simply made the line harder to pretend not to see. For almost a week, everyone focused on what might be inside that container. I did too. The closed doors were the obvious mystery, but by the time authorized people finally opened them, the important evidence was already outside. It was in the obsolete map that stopped at a hedge no longer there. It was in the missing owner's signature. It was in the delivery photo showing who accepted the container. It was in the meeting notice promising a reopening before the storage plan existed. And it was in 3 different explanations for one locked steel box. I never needed to cut the lock. I never needed to threaten anyone or pretend I understood rules I had not read. I needed to preserve what I could see, ask narrow questions, and make sure the people responsible for the next decision had the same records. That is the part homeowners sometimes miss. Documentation is not powerful because it creates a dramatic surprise. It is powerful because it prevents the story from changing every time someone new asks what happened. The container is gone now. The pool is open. The strip behind my garage is empty again. And after everything that happened, empty looks exactly the way it should.